She was a brilliant speaker in a wheelchair. He was a quiet filmmaker in the back row. Their love broke every expectation, but on their wedding night, she revealed a secret that left him speechless. What she did next would change everything. He thought he knew about her, and about love itself. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now let's jump into the story. The sun filtered through wide glass windows as a warm breeze rustled the banners hanging inside the old community theater. It was the annual Voices That Matter Symposium, a quiet, little-known event where artists, writers, and speakers came to share stories that didn't make headlines but should have. Julian wasn't supposed to be there. He'd finished filming a documentary the week before and had planned to rest, maybe disappear into a small cabin with bad signal and too many trees. But his friend, a panel moderator, convinced him last minute. "Come listen," she'd said. "There's a woman speaking whose words might just follow you home." Julian sat in the back row, arms folded, coffee in hand, more curious than convinced. Then she rolled on stage, Naya. No lights changed, no music swelled, but something shifted anyway. She wasn't flashy, no dramatic gestures, no soft violins playing. Under her words, just her, in a light blue dress, sitting confidently in her wheelchair, eyes calm, voice steady. She didn't speak about her disability at first. She spoke about design, how cities, apps, schools, and stories all forget people like her. How access wasn't just about ramps and buttons, but about being seen as worthy of existing without apology. She paused often, letting her words breathe, and every time, the room leaned in. Julian had been to countless talks. He'd filmed people who climbed mountains, swam across oceans, and built cities from dust. But something about Nia's presence held him. She didn't need to move the room. She made the room come to her. After the panel, people rushed the stage. Some wanted selfies, some just wanted to say, "Thank you," and move on. Julian waited. When the crowd thinned, he stepped forward. "I'm Julian," he said. "I filmed a lot of people saying powerful things. But today you made me stop listening and start thinking." Nia smiled. "That's the best compliment I've gotten." All week they talked for 6 minutes, long enough for him to know he wanted to talk for 60 more. He asked if she'd like to grab coffee sometime, not as a fan, not for an interview, just as two people curious about each other. She hesitated for a beat, not because she wasn't interested, but because this early part, was always the hardest, but something about him felt real. So she said yes. Their first coffee lasted 5 hours. It started with small things: favorite movies, worst jobs, odd food habits. Julian hated mangoes, which Nia found suspicious. But soon, the talk deepened. They discussed identity, vulnerability, and what it meant to feel like both too much and not enough in a world that liked easy categories. Nia shared stories from her early 20s, before the injury that left her paralyzed from the waist down. How she'd been a dancer once. How she'd learned to write again using voice-to-text software when her hands struggled from nerve damage. How she never wanted to be anyone's inspiration, just someone who was fully seen. Julian didn't flinch, or offer pity. He didn't say the usual things. He asked thoughtful questions. He laughed when she made dry jokes. And most importantly, he didn't stare at her chair. He looked at her. They kept meeting. Parks, bookstores, quiet corners of cafes. There was a rhythm growing between them. Slow, intentional, unforced. But outside their bubble, the world had questions. Strange, awkward, uninvited questions. One day, a waiter asked Julian, "So are you her caregiver or?" Another time, a stranger leaned over to Nia and said, "It's nice to see someone giving people like you a chance." Nia's smile never cracked, but Julian saw the flicker in her eyes. His own family wasn't immune. His sister Claire called one evening. "She seems lovely," she said, "but are you sure you're ready for what that life means?" Julian had no answer she'd understand, so he just said, "I'm not preparing for anything. I'm choosing someone." Even his friends didn't quite get it. They joked, gently, but often. Asked if he was trying to make a statement, told him he was brave, but Julian wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't trying to be the good guy in someone else's story. He simply met someone who made him feel more alive, more curious, more him. And he liked that feeling. Nia, meanwhile, was careful. She had learned to protect her heart. Past relationships had been messy. Some men were fascinated with her disability in strange, uncomfortable ways. Others tried to fix her, to push her into treatments or therapies she didn't want. So she took her time. But Julian never pushed. He never asked when she'd walk again, never hinted at anything changing. He held her hand in public. He kissed her forehead before long meetings. He texted her silly memes at midnight just to say he was thinking of her. Once, Nia looked at him across a dinner table, her fingers wrapped around a glass of lemon water, and said softly, "You know what I like about you?" Julian leaned in. "Tell me." "You never treat me like I'm some chapter in your hero journey." He smiled. "That's because I'm just hoping to be a footnote in yours," she laughed, and something in her heart, tired from carrying walls and warnings, began to soften. 3 months later, Julian invited her to a cabin by the lake. Nothing fancy. Just trees, quiet, and a small fire pit. As the sky turned to violet and the stars blinked into view, he wheeled her to the water's edge. Then he sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, saying nothing at first. After a long pause, he said, "I know the world doesn't always see us right, but I don't care what they see." Nia turned toward him. "I just want to build something that makes sense to us," Julian said. "No explanations, no performances, just real." And under that starlit silence, Nia reached for his hand. She didn't say yes, but she didn't pull away either. And that was the moment Julian knew. He wasn't falling for an idea. He was falling for her. The day of the wedding began with light, rain tapping gently against the windows of a small countryside inn. Nia sat in front of a wide mirror, wearing a silk robe and a peaceful smile. Outside, guests were beginning to arrive, some from as close as the next town, others from across oceans. Julian had always said he didn't want a big wedding. Neither did Nia. They both preferred meaning over flash, connection over crowd. So, they had chosen this quiet spot surrounded by trees and open sky. No ballrooms, no stages, just a garden, a few fairy lights, and the people who had truly shown up for them over the years. Nia's cousin Layla adjusted the tiny pearl pins in her hair. "You nervous?" Nia laughed softly. "Only about the part where I try not to cry, before my makeup is done." Layla smiled, then paused. "You sure you don't want to tell him? Before today?" Nia turned her eyes back to the mirror, watching her reflection as if studying a stranger. "I've thought about it," she said. "Every day. But this isn't about secrets, it's about timing." Layla nodded. She knew exactly what Nia meant. For 2 years, Nia had quietly taken part in a new medical trial that helped her slowly regain limited feeling and movement in her legs. It had been painful, uncertain, and private. She could now stand and take a few steps, but it came with discomfort, instability, and a wave of emotional weight. She hadn't told Julian, not because she didn't trust him, but because she did. Too many men in the past had changed the way they looked at her once they learned she could walk, like she was suddenly more desirable, more complete. But Julian had never made her feel less than whole, not once. That's why she waited. Julian stood in the garden, adjusting his vest while trying not to fidget. His best friend Eli nudged him with a grin. "Relax, man. You look like you're about to jump into a pool with your suit on." Julian chuckled nervously. "I feel like I already did." Then he heard the soft music begin. All heads turned. Nia appeared at the end of the aisle, framed by 2 oak trees, the leaves rustling gently behind her. She wore a flowing ivory dress, carefully tailored to complement her seated form. Her cousin, Layla, stood beside her, guiding the chair slowly forward down the aisle. Julian's heart nearly stopped. To him, she wasn't just beautiful, she was breathtaking. the kind of beauty that came from presence, strength, and the quiet confidence of someone who had lived through fire and came out shining. As she rolled toward him, their eyes locked, and in that gaze, nothing else mattered. Not the weather, not the whispers, not the stares, just them. The ceremony was short but filled with meaning. They didn't exchange long speeches, just simple, honest vows. Julian said, "I see you, all of you, not for what the world notices, but for the way you light it up without asking permission." Nia said, "You never asked me to change. You just walked beside me even when I was rolling." The crowd clapped. Some cried. Even the officiant had to pause and clear his throat. Afterward, the reception was held in a cozy barn strung with soft lights and scattered wildflowers. There was laughter, dancing, and clinking glasses. Julian and Nia shared their first dance, her hands on his shoulders, his arms around her, the chair moving gently across the wooden floor as guests watched in admiration. But under her joy, Nia felt the quiet weight of the moment still to come. She had decided tonight would be the night, she told him. Later, in the soft warmth of their honeymoon suite, Julian opened the door with one hand and wheeled her gently inside with the other. The room was simple but full of little touches, a trail of rose petals, candles flickering on a table, and the faint sound of their favorite jazz song playing from a speaker. Julian poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. Nia didn't drink, and handed her one with a smile. "To the best day of my life." She took it, clinked gently, and sipped. Then her smile softened. Her voice lowered. "Julian," she said, "can we sit for a moment?" "Of course," he said without hesitation. He pulled 2 pillows down to the floor beside her and sat cross-legged, facing her completely. "There's something I haven't told you," Nia said. "Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to know who you were first." Julian listened, eyes steady, no panic in them, just attention. Nia took a deep breath. 2 years ago, I started an experimental neuro-rehab program. I didn't expect much, but little by little I started regaining feeling, in my legs, in my feet. I can walk now. A little. Not far. Not without pain. But I can. Julian blinked. He didn't speak. He let her finish. "I kept it private," she continued, "because I've been treated differently before, as if walking somehow made me more. I needed to know that you loved me now, not for what I could be someday." A long pause stretched between them. Julian reached out and gently took her hand. "You didn't need to prove anything," he said. "I know," Nia replied, "but I want to show you anyway. Not to impress you, but to trust you." She shifted slowly. With deliberate effort, she placed her feet on the floor. Julian instinctively reached out to help, but she held up her hand. "I've got this." With practiced strength, she rose. Her knees shook, her breath caught, but step by step she stood and moved across the floor. Julian didn't move. He watched, silent, awed, as Nia walked the few steps to him and fell into his arms. No words. Just heartbeats. When she looked up, his eyes were wet. "You're not amazing because you stood," he whispered. "You're amazing because you've carried the weight of this truth alone, and still chose to share it." Nia exhaled, her body trembling. "Nothing changes," he said. "Not how I see you. Not how I love you." She smiled, tears finally falling. Then Julian helped her sit again, easing her legs back into a resting position. "Let the world wonder," he whispered. "You already won me the day you rolled into that theater." The room was still, not quiet, like when nothing happens. Still, like the calm after something sacred has just passed through. Nia sat back in her wheelchair, her legs sore but her heart light. Across from her, Julian remained kneeling, eyes never leaving hers. He looked like a man who had just witnessed something far greater than he expected and was still catching up to it. She had shown him her secret. She had stood and walked, not far, not perfect, but enough to show him what she'd been carrying alone, and he hadn't pulled away. He hadn't cheered like it was a performance. He'd simply opened his arms and caught her like he always had. Gently, quietly, without needing a reason. Now they both sat in the warm candlelight, breathing the same soft air, their fingers still placed together. "I didn't know how to tell you," Nia finally said. Julian shook his head gently. "You didn't need to, I'm just honored you let me in." Nia let out a shaky breath. "You'd be surprised how many people think walking makes me more real, more whole, like I was waiting to be fixed." He moved closer, placing his hand over hers. "I never saw you as broken," he said. "I still don't." She looked down at their hands. It's hard not to expect that reaction, though, even the kind ones. They flinch, even if just for a second. Julian nodded slowly. "We're trained to see bodies a certain way, but I've always been more interested in what moves the soul." That made her smile. They sat like that for a while. The candle flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls, but neither of them needed to fill the space with words. It was the kind of silence that said everything. Later that night, they moved to the couch, curled under a knit blanket. The fire in the corner crackled softly, and Nia rested her head against Julian's shoulder. She told him stories she hadn't told anyone before, about the early months after her injury, when people would visit with flowers and forced smiles, always leaving just before the tears came. About the nights she stared at her ceiling, wondering if she'd ever feel wanted again. About the therapists, who encouraged her to push harder, and the ones who actually listened. Julian listened to every word. He asked questions. Not the kind that poked at her pain, but the kind that showed he was learning from it. Nia laughed as she recalled how a boy in high school had once called her too intense because she corrected his grammar during a text argument. Julian smiled. "You? Intense? Never," he joked. She playfully elbowed him. Their laughter filled the room like music, weaving between old fears and fresh hopes. At some point, Julian pulled out a small notebook from his backpack. "I didn't plan to give you this tonight," he said, "but I think now's the right moment." He handed it to her. On the cover was a watercolor sketch of two people on a quiet bench, one sitting, one standing, hands joined in the middle. Nia opened the notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten moments, things Julian had noticed about her since the day they met. "The way your eyes light up when you speak about justice. The way you tilt your head when you're curious. The way you roll with grace like you're leading the room without trying. The day I realized I wasn't just inspired by you, I was in love with you." Nia's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they didn't sting. They felt warm, like a tide washing away years of being misunderstood. "You wrote all of this?" she whispered. Julian nodded. "I didn't want to forget any of it." She closed the notebook carefully, holding it to her chest. "Thank you," she said, "not just for loving me, but for doing it without needing me to be anything different." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows, warming the hardwood floor. Nia stirred gently and reached for her chair without hesitation. She rolled toward the mirror, adjusted the lace headband in her hair, and smiled at her reflection. Julian leaned against the doorway, watching her. "Still glowing," he said. She turned. "Still lucky?" "More than ever." They shared breakfast on the patio, wrapped in sweaters, watching birds land on the railing and fly off again. Nia sipped tea while Julian read from a book he'd brought. They didn't talk much, they didn't have to. Later they went for a slow stroll. Her in her chair, Julian walking beside her, matching her pace, pushing aside low-hanging branches so she could see the lake. They stopped at the edge of the water and just breathed. In the weeks that followed, something subtle shifted between them. Not in love, love had been steady, but in ease. There were no more unsaid things. No more waiting for the right moment. Nia felt more open, more at peace. She decided it was time. Time to share her story with the world. Not because she needed approval, but because she knew someone, somewhere, needed to see that a person like her could love and be loved fully, without needing to change, fix, or prove anything. Julian supported her completely. He helped her set up her camera, edit her script, and arrange the lighting. But he stayed behind the scenes always. "This is your voice," he said. "And it's already perfect." She titled the video, "The Strength You Don't See." She sat in her chair, calmly sharing her truth. She talked about what people assume, what they miss, and what it truly takes to live with dignity in a world not built for you. Halfway through, she stood, slowly, carefully, with the help of a cane. She took a few steps forward, paused, then sat back down. "People cheer when I walk," she said into the lens. "But they don't see the strength it takes to sit, to face every day with grace when the world stares like you're less." The video ended with her smiling, looking directly into the camera. "This chair isn't my weakness," she said. "It's my freedom." When she uploaded the video, it started small, then it grew. Fast. Messages came pouring in, from teenagers, parents, even strangers who said they'd never thought about mobility or identity in this way before. Naya didn't seek fame. She wanted connection, and that's what she got. Julian watched it all unfold from the background, cheering quietly. When asked by a journalist what it felt like to be married to someone so brave, he simply said, "She's not brave, because she stood. She's brave because she trusted someone enough to stand in front of them." 3 months had passed since Nia's video went viral. She hadn't expected the response. The messages, comments, interviews, and emails. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. People didn't just say thank you. They shared their own stories. Stories of feeling invisible, of being underestimated, of choosing to show up in the world just as they were. Julian kept a folder of his favorite comments and read them aloud to Nia during breakfast some mornings. Her favorite was from a young girl named Layla who said, "I showed your video to my whole class. Now they understand why my wheelchair doesn't make me less." That one made Nia cry. Not out of sadness, but out of relief, because that had been her goal all along, to help just one person feel seen. But despite the attention and praise, their life together remained simple. Nia still taught workshops from home. Julian kept working on short films about overlooked voices in society. They still went on slow weekend strolls, picked wildflowers from the park, and shared quiet cups of tea while watching the rain. And through it all, they never let the noise outside their world change the peace they'd built inside it. On the morning of their 3rd anniversary, Julian woke up early. He crept out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Nia, and went to the living room. The box he had hidden in the coat closet now sat on the coffee table, waiting. He heard the wheels softly roll across the wooden floor. Nia appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "You're up early," she said, with a smile. Julian grinned. "Special occasion?" She raised an eyebrow. "Did you finally admit I'm right about pineapple on pizza?" "Not yet," he said, laughing. "But I've got something better." He handed her the box. Inside was a deep green leather journal, the cover smooth and soft, with her name engraved on the front in small gold letters. She opened it. On the first page, Julian had written, "I fell in love with a woman who rolls. I married one who walks, but I will grow old beside the one who moves people, no matter how she gets there." Nia stared at the page for a long moment. Her fingers lightly traced the words. Then she looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "Julian," she whispered, voice thick with emotion, "you always know how to say exactly what I need to hear." He sat beside her, his hand over hers. "That's only because I'm always listening." That evening, they invited a few close friends over for a quiet dinner. Laughter filled their apartment. Music floated in the air, and plates of food disappeared faster than anyone could keep track of. At one point, someone asked them to share their favorite moment from their relationship. Julian looked at Nia. Nia looked back, and without speaking, they both knew what it was. The night she stood. But it wasn't the walking that mattered. It was the silence that followed. The kind of silence that only exists when someone sees all of you, and stays. Nia cleared her throat and said, "My favorite moment wasn't something big or dramatic. It was a moment when I felt completely safe. completely loved, and completely me. The room went quiet. Everyone nodded. No one needed more details. They felt the truth in her words. Later, after their guests had gone, Nia and Julian danced slowly in their living room. There was no music, just the rhythm of their steps, his feet moving, her chair gliding, hands wrapped around each other. Julian whispered, "You know, people always ask me what it's like, being married to someone so strong." Nia smiled. "And what do you say?" "I tell them strength isn't loud, it doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to show up every single day, no matter how hard." She kissed his cheek. "I like that." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You're not strong because you walked. You're strong because you didn't wait for the world to accept you. You decided to live your truth anyway." The next morning, they took a short trip to a nearby lake. It had become their favorite place, a small, peaceful spot where they could just be. No questions, no cameras, just them. Nia rolled down the wooden path, her blanket tucked across her lap. Julian followed with a thermos of tea and 2 paper cups. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun shimmer on the water's surface. "I used to think I needed to keep proving myself," Nia said softly. "That I had to work harder, be louder, walk farther, just to be taken seriously." Julian looked at her. "And now?" "Now I know stillness is its own kind of strength." He nodded. "It's the kind of strength that makes people stop and look closer, the kind that changes them quietly." She reached for his hand. "I don't want to be someone's inspiration anymore." "You're not," he said. "You're just someone worth loving, exactly as you are." As the sun began to set, they packed up their things and headed back home. Nia rolled ahead a little, and Julian watched her, smiling. She moved with purpose, not rushed, not hesitant, just steady and sure. She stopped at the top of the path, turned back and called to him, "Still feel lucky?" He laughed, "Even more than yesterday." Back at home, Nia received one more message that evening. It was from Layla again, the girl who had written to her months ago. This time, Layla had shared a drawing. It was a picture of a girl in a wheelchair holding hands with someone standing beside her. Above it, the words, "You don't need to. Stand to take a stand." Nia showed it to Julian, tears welling up. "She gets it," she said. Julian hugged her, "Because you helped her see it." And so their story continued, not with grand gestures or perfect days, but with honesty, love, and a quiet kind of courage that filled every room they entered. They didn't need to be a symbol. They just needed to be true to each other. And in a world that often rushed toward the loudest voices, Nia and Julian had found a deeper kind of power, not in how fast they moved or how far, but in the way they stood still, together.